And welcome back to Open Studio. Picking up right where we left off. We're doing headlights. Okay. Last week we were kind of starting in those bright white highlights, but I had mentioned that I need to add a little bit more contrast in some of this area. So I still have black in this brush, opaque black. I'm feeling these very last highlights that I put in here, they're in the wrong place. So I'm going to pretty much erase them while I'm darkening all this. It's easy to, well, with this brush it's easy to just kind of change the value of that whole area without affecting too much of the detail, which is really nice. So those highlights that I put in, those little tiny ones, trail up too far, which is, I realized that when I leaned back at the end of the last episode. I'm like, oop, that was the wrong thing. But that's okay. The other mistake was these extra little lines down here. This highlight it doesn't do that. It starts to fade out. So I'm going to I don't have to, paint over them and erase them and redo them. I just have to take the curse off them. Just add that darkness, and then I'll add the highlight in over that, which will put it in the right spot. Okay, so that's good. That's actually really bright. I didn't need to do that. But it was up in here that I wanted to hit. So this was the area, right? This whole area where the light bulb is actually in the back of this lamp. It was much darker than I had it. So, and I didn't, color and value is usually relative if you're doing something. You don't necessarily realize that it's not dark enough or light enough until you put a really dark or light area next to it. So that's exactly what had gone on with this, and that's fine. I'd much rather have to add a little bit to it than to find out, oh crap, I made it too dark, and then it's a little bit more work to get that straightened out. So the other thing I've been working on, because I'm always working on stuff, and I just did it because I've been putting up a lot of these videos, the ones that I record and then put up. Now this isn't a good example. The Open Studio is just I turn the camera on and I go. There's no editing, there's no nothing. There you see the entire 30 minutes and whatever happens, that kind of thing. But on the other videos like Tech Tuesday and some of the other videos that I put up, I'm able to edit them. And what I'm finding is that I am not very good at not using and so. I'm working on that, and I'm fortunate to have a brother who is a professional broadcaster. So there we go. So I said so, and I'm going to say in a second, but I'm trying hard, and I've got some good tips from him on how to solve that and get that under control. So again, for instance, one of the Tech Tuesdays that I just did, I had 86 edits on it for those problems, for saying so and coughing and all the other fun stuff. But we'll get better. I watch some of my favorite YouTubers, and I know I do. I take for granted how much work goes into the editing part of it. Like I see these videos that look, well, because they look flawless. Like the people look like they're just got everything going on. They know exactly what to say, and they've got it all worked out. And even the YouTubers I follow that you write their own scripts, still, it's like, they're perfect. And until I started kind of getting into this, there's a lot of editing that goes on. I know with me anyway. Some people can do it one shot, which I'm impressed with, but not me. I was happy though after talking to my brother and said, hey, this I don't really want to sit in front of the computer and take ums and so's out of every single video for an hour. Is there anything I could do to be better at it? Like I said, he had some great advice, and if you're wondering what that advice was, it was simply, you need to slow down. Now that's hard for me. But that's what he said, and he was correct, because the next Tech Tuesday video that I recorded, I only had 30 edits. So they are getting a little better anyway. All right, so again, all these little highlights, it's not a continuous line that shoots across this thing. It's the little tiny, what it is the highlights hit the corners of these little rectangles that make this up, and that's what you're seeing. And then your brain is connecting the dots on what's going on with the rest of it. You're saying, okay, I can see the pattern, because our brains love patterns. And once our brain says, oh, I've got it, then the brain takes over and says, okay, it's all horizontal and vertical lines that make up little rectangles, and that I win. And then your brain gets a cookie, and that's how that goes. So again, like I talked about in the last episode, I don't want to make it that easy. You know, I don't want to tell the story in summary and have the viewer's brain just say, oh, it's what it is. I want to have all those details so that your brain goes through the same mental gymnastics that it would if it was looking at it live. Hopefully that makes sense, because it makes sense rolling around in my head. That doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense in the real world, though. Yes. Oops, that was too much. That's all right, though. There's a lot of leeway here. I mean, you know, this is not one for one. I could certainly, if I really, really wanted to, and I do this on portraits a lot, if I wanted every single detail to be perfectly in the same spot as the photo, I would make another photocopy that's just, you know, of the headlight, and I would do that flip trick. And I don't know if I don't think I've done it on this open studio, but if you watch any of my other content, you'll see me doing that, where you take the photocopy, you put it on top. Actually, I'll kind of show you without doing it. First I have to find one. Here it is. So say this is a washed out photocopy, by the way. This is one of the ones that are overexposed, so I could see some of the other darker details, but you'll still get the idea. So if I were to, what I do is I line this right up on top like this. And then I do this like flip book technique, where I'm flipping this back and forth, and what I'm able to do is I can see exactly where those details are. And then my brain, my eyes, it's persistence of vision. It'll keep that detail in my vision for just a split second, so that when I flip it, I can put it right where it should be, exactly where it should be. So that I could do that with this. But for this painting, I want it to look photorealistic, but I'm not going for that type of thing where it is like a one-to-one. I don't really necessarily need that with this one. Which is the other thing that goes with it too. Everyone's like, oh, just take a picture. It's like, well, if I took a picture, it would look like the picture. It wouldn't look like my painting. Because there's so much of that going on, where I'm just kind of making little tiny minute adjustments to brighten something or push something back, or just kind of I call it human photoshopping, and it's not really, I don't know, I hope that doesn't come across as negative, but that's really what it is. I'm making all those adjustments that a photographer would make in Photoshop of a picture that they had taken that they needed to do some work on. So I know I should start a tip jar. Like every time I say it, I throw money into it and then use it for speech therapy classes or something. All right. Excellent. It is coming together though. It's looking pretty shiny. There are some bright highlights behind here that I don't have in, which I want to. So I gotta kind of put that in the mental bank because there are some lighter highlights that are right in here. They're white, but they're very soft. So what I'll do is when I get the airbrush to do the final glow, I gotta remember to put some of those in as well. So this area right here is super bright. This is like brilliant highlight. So again, we'll just, I put this first coat on here when we were working on this last week. So I'll just keep adding coats to that till it's as white as it needs to be, or opaque as it needs to be actually. Put these big highlights in here, big fat juicy shiny highlights. This one, now that I've darkened that, this one can go in. Brilliant. All right, where am I at? We're going to finish this headlight in this episode, which is exciting. I never know with really super crazy detail stuff. Sometimes I don't get a good feel for how long something is going to take. Which I'm glad I don't do many commissions anymore, because oftentimes, you know, you have to, like we talked about last week, you have to, as someone who's running a business, you have to figure out how long something takes you to do so you can accurately come up with a price for someone when they're asking. Sometimes it's hard to do that with things that are this involved, especially if it's something that I've, you know, never painted before. I mean, headlights and bikes and cars, and I've done a lot of those, so I usually have a pretty good idea. But if it's something that I don't normally paint, but which means I need to figure it out while I'm working on it, that can take a lot of time. And sometimes you can't make that judgment call on how long it's going to take. And then, trust me, I've run into the situation where I've said, oh yeah, this is what it's going to cost, and we'll get this done. And I get into it, and it's like, holy smoke, it's going to take 5 times longer than I thought. And of course, that's on me at that point, because it's my job to give them an accurate idea. So it's fun with these. There's no pressure that way for me. It's like, however long it takes, that's what it is. Again, these bright highlights that need a little bit of extra coats, I kind of hit them and then leave them alone and then come back to them. Like this one here is a big highlight, and it covers a larger area. So I could airbrush this. Then that would make it opaque with much less paint. But if it's a small enough area like that, it's okay to paintbrush it too. For me anyway. All right, so this highlight here, actually I want to paint it, but I will a little bit. It's mostly glow in this one. It's also a large highlight because whatever it is from above is kind of catching the lens here. So these gray lines are a lot thinner because of the highlight. So I'm going to thin those up. And again, I don't want to fall in the trap that I did last time where I just get into a zone and start doing this all the way across, because it doesn't look like that in real life. That right there is lovely. And then they continue on the other side up here a little bit. Again, I'll pull all this together with the airbrush, which I will do shortly. Oh, some more nice highlights down in here too. That looks lovely. All right, let's do it. What do we got for time here? We got plenty of time. We're going to move on. We're going to get the headlight done and then move on. This is great. All right, so the next step is going to be the highlights with the airbrush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the 1-to-1 mix. So it's 1 part opaque white to 1 part 4011 reducer. For the most part, for all this miniature painting, this is my go-to white. I have a few other variations of this. I have a heavier 2-to-1, which is still a lot of reduction. It's 2 parts paint to 1 part reducer. Depending on the gun you're using, you don't really have to over-reduce like I do. Again, I'm working really small and in tiny areas, and I'm using very small airbrushes, and that all equals that I need a thinner paint. So don't necessarily run out and add 100% reducer to your white Createx and then expect it to work the same way if you're spraying with something like an Eclipse BCS, a 0.5 millimeter brush. So if I put 1-to-1 in this, what's going to seem really opaque and cool here and controllable is going to be a soggy, wet mess in this brush. It's just going to push out way too much paint way too fast. So another quarter in the tip jar. Maybe that's what I will do. Make some money on myself. All right, good. Got this brush here. So I'm going to use the, as I say so again, 87 edits, 86 edits. Anyway, this is the Micron C, and I usually use this for white, I know, another quarter in the tip jar. I usually use this for white. The other one I use is the 0.3 millimeter Rich Pen 113C. This is actually Mike Learn's. I want to dump this over. I want to make sure there's nothing in it. This is it's upside down, but there's this is the Mike Learn Mobro. So it's a Rich Pen 113C. I use this one a lot too. I keep saying it. I had a HPCS, which is the one missing brush in my lineup. I have an HPCS, an Eclipse. It's a little bit bigger than that 113. But what I did was I took all the guts out of it and replaced it with the 0.5 setup from an Eclipse like this one, a BCS, bottle feed. So that brush I use for metallics, and I have a gravity feed that will spray metallic paint or t-shirt paint straight out of the bottle. It's amazing. But what I really need is I need just a dedicated HPCS. It's just a nice size nozzle. It's a little bit bigger than the Mobro. It'll spray a little bit heavier material, but still with a ton of detail. So I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but there you go. So Micron with the white. Now what I'm going to do is just add the subtle glow on those heavy highlights. And if you remember too, I said I wanted to lighten up some stuff up here. So I'm going to do that first. So I didn't want to do this with the paintbrush because the highlights that are behind here are much softer. They're definitely on where these brilliant sharp highlights are on the outside of this glass lens. The highlights I'm putting in now are on the back side of that lens, on the inside. So they're not as bright, they're not as sharp. So I don't want to do those with the paintbrush. I kind of wanted to hit them with the airbrush. Okay, so now the fun part. This is the part that, again, you wait as an airbrusher to do. Adding glow to these little white highlights is so much fun because it has this, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's impossible to do with a paintbrush because I've seen people do it with paintbrushes, but it is so easy to do with the airbrush. It's ridiculous. And it has such a monumentally cool effect. It really does make things look like they're glowing, which is awesome. So there you go. The other side of this too, I want to err on the side of not going nuts with this. Again, it's fun and it's easy to do, and what that translates into as doing it too much. And when you do too much of this, it immediately becomes horrendously gimmicky and doesn't look like what it's supposed to. And the other sad part about that is if I screw this part up, if I add too much of this, there's no going back. You have to repaint it. I mean, I don't have to strip the whole thing down, but I'd have to redo the gray first and then do the medium gray detail. That's just, it's not a good thing. So a lot of times what I'll do, or all the time what I'll try to do, is when I'm working on something like this, I'll do a little bit, then immediately lean back and look to see how it's coming together. If it's enough, then I'll stop. If it's not, then I'll add a little bit more and then do the same thing. Where I'm not trapped and zone in, just get so focused on this and have so much fun putting all these glows in that when I sit back, I'm like, crap, there's way too much. I say it because I've done it and it's easy to do. All right. I'm gonna let that sit. I feel like I want to do more, but I'm gonna let that sit because Again, I don't want to have to screw around with it. All right, I'm going to add a few more little highlights that I missed. There's some in here around the light bulb, which are probably actually the light bulb. Here we go. But that's now done. I'm very happy. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a second to clean out this brush here, because I'm not going to use white for a bit. And if I don't clean this out, it's going to dry in the airbrush and get gummy. And like I said, I just had spa day with all these brushes. They're all working fantastically. So the last thing I want to do is leave a bunch of paint in this and then start the whole messy process all over again. So the more conscientious I am about keeping things rocking, the better. I did a Tech Tuesday on this a little while ago. It was a suggestion that was brilliant, and I've been airbrushing forever and never thought of this. I obviously use Createx, which is a water-based paint, so I can get away with this. What I do, you can still see all right, so here's a perfect example. So I fleshed that out, but you can still see in the back, there's that residual white paint. That's what I'm talking about. That dries, and then that's a tiny thin layer of paint that's stuck in there. Anyway, what I do is when I flush them out, I leave a little bit of water in the bottom like that, especially at night. And it's brilliant. It keeps the paint from drying in the brush overnight. That little bit of white paint there in the back of the cup, if there was no water in there, that would set up and that would dry, and then that would be a layer of paint that I'd have to try to get out. But because I have water in there, that's going to stay soluble, and I can just flush that out again and be ready to rock. So thanks to Philippe. That was, again, I'm sure a bunch of airbrush artists are saying, yeah, I knew that. We do that all the time. I did not. All right, let's finish this up. So that lens is pretty much done. I'm going to leave that and just kind of relax on that, make sure that's right. So if you remember, what happened was we left the bezel of this headlight, the actual housing, there we go, housing of the headlight, so I could finish the rest of this because the housing is on the outside of the lens. So now I can finish this housing. I can finish this up. So let's switch gears out of the reflection type of gear. Okay, so I got the blue on there already, which is good. So it's really just the darks on this that are needing to be buttoned up. I have the yellow on there. Those are details, so I don't have to worry about that. So, I did mean to say that, so. Do I want this brush? No, I don't want this brush. I want this brush. Oh, black. Let's just go for it. I still have black in this brush from the headlight. So I can start darkening this guy up. There should be brown on here to really make it accurate, but I'm going to see how it goes. Actually, what I can do is I can start working on the texture up in here a little bit with this color, because this is, again, I use this on the headlight. This is that really over reduced black. It's 1 part paint to 20 parts reducer. It's insanely reduced. The upside is it has amazing detail, but the downside is if I want to color in like this small section down here, it would take forever to do. So I'm going to use this to kind of just add that airbrush texture around the areas before I go and fill it in. So I have the frame for this already. This series of paintings, there are 5 of these paintings in the whole series. So I had 5 frames made up for them. I don't necessarily know that I'm going to use that frame for this painting now. The way this painting is going, it's going to need, I feel like it's going to need a different type of frame than what I have. I just have a plain black floater frame for it. But if I had a nice wide worn oak frame, like old barn wood, it might really look good with this. And that's okay. It's okay and it's not okay. I told the story a bunch of times. I'd ordered floater frames for 5x7 paintings. and from a company that, it's a frame, they make frames. The frames I got were not 5x7. They were some really weird, odd shape. In fact, they were this odd shape. I had one painting already done and ready to go, and I needed the frame for it. Or no, why did I do that? Oh, what I decided to do was, instead of sending them back and waiting, because it took a while to get them, instead of waiting for the frames to come in, I'm like, you know what, I'll just readjust. I'll change the size of the paintings to fit the frames. And let me grab the ruler. It's an odd size. This painting is 4.5 by, this is the weird one. This is what I don't get. It's 4.5 by 6 7/8. Like that, it wasn't even like I was ordering an odd size. I was ordering 5x7. It should be 5x7. And at first I'm thinking, maybe it's me. Maybe I did something wrong, but I checked and it wasn't. It was the right size. I never, and this is on me too. I never contacted them and said, hey, what is this? I just kind of rolled with it. But as a result, I have 5 paintings that are these really weird sizes with these really weird frames. So if I do choose another frame for this, I'm going to have an extra weird black frame, which I'm not overly too upset about right now. And if I never use it, that's okay too. It's more that this painting is taking on a life of its own, and it's going to need, I think it's going to need its own frame. We shall see though. The framing stuff always comes in at the end. I mean, I usually have an idea when I'm working on a painting what the frame is going to be. But sometimes, again, like this one, sometimes I get them started, I get them rolling, and it takes on a life of its own. It just says, nope, that's not the frame I want something different, and that's okay. I usually frame everything myself. I've had the fortune of knowing some really, really great framers and great woodworkers along the way. I haven't done any looking here yet in Ohio. I moved here during summer 2020, so I don't know. I don't know who in the area, or I don't know too many framers in this area. But the ones I knew in Massachusetts were fantastic, and I use them a lot. So, but I also end up framing a lot because I like that part of the process too. And for these small paintings, the frames are such a part of the painting because they're so small. People are right on them. It's not like a regular frame where you're looking at it from 6 feet away. And these frames, you're on it. You're at 6 inches away from them, so they take on a different kind of feel overall. Which I like, and I've really kind of embraced that too. Lovely. Yeah, so this is all just kind of putting in this scumbled, pitted, rusty kind of texture that's going on in here. And this brush is an absolute monster. Again, I just cleaned it. It's running like it's brand new, and I can do microscopic things with this brush. It is, I wish I could use this all the time. The only reason I can't is because it's a gigantically super detailed brush. So it's made for that. The Micron C is much more of a versatile detail brush. I know that sounds weird, but it is. The Micron C can handle a thicker paint. It can, you can do some crazy detail with it, but it can also handle, a bigger area. This brush here is like a supercar. It is built to do what I'm doing right now. Just this micro small stuff. And that's great, but if I had to use this on a bigger project, it would be, like I said, I always say it, it's like taking your Ferrari to go get groceries every day. It sounds like a great idea and it's a lot of fun, but one, you're going to kick the crap out of the car, and two, it's way overkill. Yeah, This is coming together nice. Again, I want to finish that black section, but again, with this paint, it'll take forever. So don't use that paint. Let me just finish this area right up here, and then I'll put a little bit thicker paint. This, you know, don't get me wrong, this brush will take all the reductions that I have, the 1-to-1 reduction, the 1-to-5, 1-to-10, all that. Just overall, it performs way better with the super over thin stuff than it does with the heavier stuff like this, what I'm about to put in it. And again, this is, you can't see it, it's 1-to-1, 1 part paint to 1 part reducer. Ooh, and that's blocked up. Interesting. That's all blocked up. The bottle is dried on the tip of the, I'll show you in a second once I get this. Oh, interesting. This is all dried up. Huh, I gotta clean this out. What I should do eventually, well, I don't know. Hold on. I'll show you. As I get paint all over myself. One second while I remove all the paint I just dumped on me. There we go. Okay, well, all that was going on off camera was the top of that bottle has dried completely and it's sealed. But when I went to go pull the cap off to put a drop of paint in, there's literally paint all dried inside of this. Nothing was moving. So, and then I took the cap off and then I dumped paint all over myself, and now you're caught up. All right. All right, I know we're running a little bit over. I'm going to just hit this real quick and then we'll call it on this one. But at this point, other than some paintbrush work, this headlight is done. So see how fast this covers, and with control and all that, it's just a different animal. The downside to having it thicker and cover like this is I can't get the same kind of micro small details that I could get with the thinner paint. So it's just a trade-off, and it's why I mix a whole bunch of them. All right. I know, again, we're running a little bit late, but that's okay. I'm going to switch you guys over this way now so you can see it a little bit better, because we are pretty much done with that headlight. I got to do some quick paintbrush details in here on the housing, but there it is. You survived your first headlight. Congratulations, everyone. All right. I am Steve Leahy. This is Open Studio. Thank you so much again. Please like and subscribe if you have not already. That means the world to me. And we will pick this guy up right where we left off next week. Thanks a lot.